Essentially, he's asking, I believe, is the divine hiddenness question. Why is God hidden? And he was asking this question by means of pondering the soul. He's saying that if we have a soul, why don't we know it as clear as we know we have a television set, was his example. And I'll start there. But what also he asked for was a positive argument for one's own theology, whether it's me or Professor Anton or Theo Warner. Fascinating. I thought he was an atheist. In fact, he's been a jerk to me in the past, and I don't particularly care much for the guy, but whatever. I'd be interested in hearing responses from all those individuals. Anton gave a little bit of a hint of his answer in comments. Whatever. Here's mine. Just to start with the divine hiddenness thing in concert with the soul, which I think is actually a good place to start. That's probably where I would start, regardless of whether you're talking about the soul or God in particular. The question is, why isn't it obvious that we have a soul if we have a soul? My answer is, it is obvious that we have a soul. In fact, if you were to go back in time a few hundred years, it would be far more obvious than what it is now. The reason we have a soul, and the reason it's obvious that we have a soul, is because we're born into this world with either the truth or the delusion that we have free will. Now, you don't need formal science to demonstrate that the world is a limited place. That is to say, we could go in a time machine, go back thousands of years, go to a hill, grab a shepherd or whatever the fuck is living around there, throw a rock down the hill and say, look, the rock goes down the hill. And then ask the shepherd, say, does that rock ever roll up the hill? And he'll look at you thinking you're crazy. And thus we demonstrate the limitation of the world. It's implicit to whatever madness we're part of. That being said, by being born into this world with at least the notion of free will, we have in ourselves the recognition of something about ourselves that is fundamentally different from everything else. Now, the tricky part comes more recently in human history, where we get into materialism and where that has taken the mainstream of contemporary thought. But will it be forever? Anyway, when you go to the ice cream stand, it used to be just a choice between chocolate or vanilla. But now you have to stop yourself, realize that, wait, no, it's not just a choice. It's rather the sum total of my conditioning history within the realm of all things flavorful, and especially ice cream from maybe this particular vendor, and certainly the flavors of chocolate and vanilla and all of their variations that I have tried. Through, that is, my very particular experience with the kind of person that I'm interacting with, who's selling the ice cream and so on and so forth, and the people that I'm with, because I might want to portray myself in a particular way that I have been reinforced to through some sort of psychological debacle there in the past. So I might actually choose against what I really enjoy. That is, what I really enjoy because of what my genetics say, because it's, of course, genetic predisposition for some of us to like Coke instead of Pepsi or chocolate instead of vanilla and these kinds of things. But when all of this is churned through, then, now I can proceed and say, I would like chocolate. Was it always so complicated? No, it wasn't. This is a new thing. This is a new thing that people are on. A new thing. Why is it not clear? Why is it not obvious? Because people have thrown out the idea of free choice. But you have to teach people to throw out the idea of free choice. If you talk to a child, the idea of the soul is pretty damn obvious. Why? Because the soul is not it's not when a Wile E. Coyote falls off a cliff and, he rises up in a sort of ghostly apparition with wings and a harp and a halo. What rather it is, and the reason that makes sense in the broadest sense, is that the soul is supposedly closer than the flesh. It's closer to God. Is that what I said? Yeah. Soul is closer to God than the flesh. And that being said, with God being something that is not contingent upon the limitations of the rolling rock down the hill business, any amount of true freedom is going to be something out of this world, dude. So it's pretty frickin' obvious. The complicating factor is rather a contemporary paradigm that we all get to bloody deal with today, that I have my personal problem with, because I frankly find it is just like, it's like the opium for the masses, where no one gets to believe they are responsible for anything anymore. They can blame it on their genes, they can blame it on their parents, it's just, I would much rather prefer, before any of you go off on me about free will, I would much rather prefer to think that I didn't have a choice about anything. Because quite frankly, taking all the responsibility for one's own actions can be quite overwhelming. Which is why I have from the beginning here said the most important philosophical question anyone could ever ask is, what should I do? None of that other bullshit applies until you discover the answer to that. Choice. Choice is the soul. If choice is free, then choice is more close to God than the brain. That's the soul. What about God then? Why doesn't God himself part the clouds and look down on people and say, hey, listen up. I got a plan for you all. You're going to do this, become that, and then marry this woman. You're going to do this, become that, to marry this other woman. Whatever. This is a problem, at least most poignantly, for people who engage in some sort of deity worship, some sort of religious conviction, where they conceive of God as a human entity, not even a personal entity. I subscribe to the idea of a personal God just because of the way I define personness. But if you pushed me on it, it might actually be circular in the end. I'm not really sure. But what I don't subscribe to is this idea that you have this kind of guy with a beard that's rooting you on to do the right thing. You know, God wants you to choose the right way. No, I don't think he wants really anything. That's kind of the point of being God. But besides that consideration, the reason he does not part the clouds and say, hi, is because that's not God. God has to be understood in a different kind of way. But the question is still begged. If it's so important, if this is the absolute source of everything, wouldn't that be obvious? Well, perhaps it is. And perhaps those of us that are arguing for that side would think so. But behold, people have their reasons for avoiding the issue, whether by hook or crook, I guess. The nature of God cannot be fully known. And again, we're talking about knowledge, we're talking about epistemology. We have to realize that epistemology is based on logic, and logic is based on grammatical tendencies that are universal, inherent to the use of language. So, meaning that if God existed, God would be the source of such laws, meaning that God would precede even the laws of logic. That's why we don't know anything in particular about God. It's in the design. It's not because I think God wants us all to find him in this sort of like soft Hallmark greeting card sort of fluffiness. No, it's just how the cookie crumbles. But for people who believe in this kind of personal sort of father figure living in the sky, and I realize some of my Christian friends find that repugnant, so I'm not talking to you people, so chill. But for the rest of you, I do think it is a problem. It does need to be addressed, because one would certainly think that it would lend itself to being like, hey, I'm bigger, I'm stronger than you, I want you guys to live this way or I'll send you to hell, that whole thing. But as soon as you consider God in a non-human sort of way, that has personal qualities, and like I said before, the personal qualities I would subscribe to God is choice. But whatever, any farther than that, it is what it is. It's existence itself. It's the criterion for what is real. To ask the question, is there a God, is, in my view anyway, proof that there is something that exists, is there not? And the criterion for what exists, why is there something rather than nothing? Sort of a question worth racking your mind about a bit, but one that might truly escape us as just a matter of fact. Just as the the dice are thrown, the cards are dealt, and so on. Had it been any other way, perhaps God would have been more apparent. But again, the divine hiddenness problem is one for people who think God is there to protect the good people and damn the bad people and that sort of business. For the rest of us, it's as mysterious as life itself, and there's no problem with that as far as I can see.